Florence Cathedral, still dominating the skyline of Florence, Italy. It's nearing 600 years old since it was completed, and it's a structure that continues to inspire awe from all who visit Florence. Yet it's interesting to note that this structure itself was an unreal advance in technology, requiring two separate architects, and a very revolutionary process to build this incredible dome, a process that was repeated on subsequent domes, even including the United States Capitol. But what's the analogy between this incredible cathedral in Florence and suppose our advances in aviation technology? Another unreal advance in our technological capability. It's really striking to think of how far and how fast we came with aviation technology. Recall that our very first endeavor into flight involved the Wright brothers in the early flight at Kitty Hawk at the start of the 20th century. A 12-second flight. And yet not 38 years later, we were already testing jet fighters in 1941. What's the real story behind these unreal advances in technology? Join me as we explore the true account in terms of aviation has always interested me for a variety of reasons. The thought of flying through the skies at unbelievable speeds. And yet I was surprised when I studied history to learn about the Heavy Press program from the United States Air Force. This was a program undertaken by the United States Air Force, or at least part of the United States Department of Defense, in the early 1950s. The intention behind this was to actually catch up with a technological gap that was well known during World War II. Concerning the Heavy Press program. Now, what exactly is heavy press? A manufacturing process to form and shape various types of metals to enable manufacturing more advanced components for various platforms such as jet fighters. And we understand that during World War II, the United States initially faced a technological gap, especially in comparison with the Air Force of Germany. And that greatest understanding was achieved through Germany's development of the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter. And so what was the real aim of this program? The United States apparently lacked the heavy press technology that had been about in Germany during World War II, and it needed to alleviate this technological gap. And this warranted the efforts of the United States to rapidly construct several of these heavy press devices. This incredible infrastructure and technology that was necessitated in order to develop these advances in aerodynamic technology. One thing I've always found intriguing, though, is the fact that the United States did not already possess these heavy presses. It's well known and accepted amongst the mainstream historical account that the United States was the best equipped military in World War II, especially in terms of the amount of materials that it produced. However, especially at the start of the war, there was a technological gap. But how exactly do we explain this technological gap, and what's the real origin behind it? Is there some sort of other explanation that we have behind the implementation of this heavy press equipment? And you can see that given its incredible colossal size, that it is something that definitely invokes our curiosity when we're trying to explain how it's possible that the United States didn't already possess these heavy press forges. And because of the technological gap, it was only after World War II. And in fact, not even after World War II, but well into the start of the period of history called the Cold War, or the undeclared conflict that would occur between the United States and the Soviet Union, representing the Western and Eastern powers appropriately. When you look at this impressive heavy machinery, though, and understand its role in forming various forms of material into pieces that could be assembled into advanced aviation platforms. And recall that in the 1960s, we could definitely make the argument that the United States had achieved its pinnacle in aviation technology, with construction of devices such as the SR-71 Blackbird and other examples. We look at the original examples, though, from Germany, which, according to the official history, were developed after World War I, as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, or Versailles if you're from Missouri, with the use of these heavy press forges. So why was it only in Germany and not in the United States that these heavy press forges were developed? Why did the United States actually have to take technology from Germany to catch up? And of course, the Soviet Union also acquired this technology. In fact, there's accounts of heavy presses that were even taken from Germany and pressed, if you'll appreciate the pun, into service in the United States and the Soviet Union. How was it this technological gap existed at that time, though? What we understand is that with the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union were trying to alleviate their technological gap. This was done by acquiring this equipment and also acquiring the experts or the technical specialists in what had been Nazi Germany and utilizing their knowledge to improve the military capabilities of both the United States and the Soviet Union. The heavy presses were essential in formatting aircraft parts and manufacturing them for use in constructing these new advanced swept-wing jet fighters. The heavy presses had enabled Germany to construct the Me-262 and even the more advanced and terrifying swept-wing fighters that were more than just a design concept but actually existed at the end of the war. And here in this image you can see the example of how this heavy press technology works, starting before the formatting and after the press to build out the die cast or the other ways that you could describe the formatting of this material. Now the real question I have is, does this only apply to metallurgy? Or could there be an application of this heavy press technology to other sorts of materials? One of the main questions that we encounter in our explorations is, what is the exact composition of the materials that were used in the construction of old world buildings? Officially, we're assured that places such as the Florence Cathedral were simply constructed out of brick and marble. And this perception endures to this day with even the more modern structures such as the Iowa State Capitol, where we're informed that it's simply built of a lot of bricks. Although if you go to the interior, you realize that's not the situation. When you look upon the impressive array and the vast gargantuan size, though, of these heavy metal forge presses, or the various other names and nomenclatures that we have for them, and believe me, there's no shortage of different names for these heavy presses, what exactly was their true purpose? And how was it the industrial leader in World War II, with the ability to construct an incredible fleet of ships, didn't have this ability? Why was it after World War II, and indeed at the start of the Korean War, that this suddenly became a program with priority? Well, again, the official explanation will be that the United States was caught completely by surprise with the Soviet Union fielding swept-wing aircraft, the MiG, which apparently the United States had forgotten that it had encountered the Me-262 during World War II. And that's what required the rapid implementation and development of these heavy press forges, so the United States could rapidly construct these advanced swept-wing jet fighter craft. Now, this is all the official historical account. But we have to ask these questions: is it possible that this is not a technology that was just simply developed out of necessity by both Germany after World War I and the United States after World War II? Is it possible that perhaps this was another technology that was salvaged from a previous civilization? Or, if not salvaged, at least found in various states of disrepair, and eventually repurposed and repaired, and then pressed back into service. Again, if you'll excuse the pun. But why is it that this didn't already exist? How exactly do we account for the rapid advances or the unreal advances in aviation technology? I always found it very shocking in my study of history how quickly aviation took off from just a glider that only flew for 12 seconds to jet fighters in under 40 years. And we even have plaques that commemorate the Wyman Gordon 50,000-ton forging press. This is probably one of the later historical plaques that you'll see dedicated to something that was built in the 1950s. And I find that very peculiar. Now, not to say that any time that we have a plaque that just automatically means that we have old world technology. The heavy presses were inspired by Germany. And this was not the government that ran Germany in World War II. This was the Weimar Republic that actually innovated and utilized the heavy presses. The treaty restrictions of Versailles had deprived Germany of its access to iron. Again, this is the official historical account. And so they needed to develop these heavy forging presses to format other metals, magnesium and aluminum. And this is the official explanation for how Germany, during the Weimar Republic period, between World War I and World War II, developed the heavy forging presses. Yet something else peculiar is that the official account states that during World War II, Germany was not able to match the industrial production output of the United States. It wasn't even able to come close. And it was also outproduced by the Soviet Union. Although the official account also informs us that the Soviet Union required a lot of support, especially logistically, from the United States in terms of providing logistics for its vast armored formations or tank formations. Another peculiar detail is the fact that the United States during World War II engaged in quite an exceptional shipbuilding program. We've talked about the construction of the 24 Essex-class fleet aircraft carriers. Quite an impressive achievement. And prior to World War II, the Royal Navy of the United Kingdom was recognized as the largest navy in being in the world. But after World War II, it's been the United States. And it was during World War II that the United States rapidly constructed these incredible capital ships. The expansion of the facilities that built these ships in these dockyards is a stunning achievement of the United States during World War II. Although it's also interesting to note that the United States had begun rearming before World War II, at least its entry into World War II. So what's the real explanation behind all this? Was the United States just able to rapidly expand its industrial capacity? There's also the rather curious awareness of Japanese military commander Yamato in the ability of the United States to rapidly expand its industrial capacity. And the explanation given for this is that, well, he simply served with the embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C. So I guess he toured all these dockyards, or he had seen reports that indicated that the United States would be able to vastly increase its industrial capacity. It's even more intriguing to note that the United States, since the end of World War II, has never indulged in any sort of effort to match this. There's never been an effort to rapidly produce this sort of fleet in a very short amount of time. The fast carrier task forces were something that were almost otherworldly, and they've never actually been matched in the sheer number of ships. Although it should be noted that the United States is the only nation that maintains its expeditionary military capacity with its carrier strike groups, as they call them now. They've had many different names over time. During World War II, though, the German army possessed quite the reputation for its armored forces, or its panzers, or tanks as they were called in the United States and the United Kingdom. The Panther, Panzer Mark V, considered the overall best tank of World War II. Although to be fair, it was inspired by the Soviet T-34, with slanted armor and a larger gun. The interesting note, though, is that while Germany possessed a technological advantage, especially at the start of the war, as the conflict went on, these technological advantages were nullified, and even the great weapons that Germany apparently possessed were no match for the sheer quantity of weapons that the Allied nations, the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, were able to field and put on the actual battlefield. It's also interesting to note how logistical limitations played quite a role in these conflicts and these major land battles. One would think that given the particular regime and what we understand about it that was in control of Germany during World War II, that the purpose of industrialization would have been one of its main goals. Yet when you actually study the conflict and you look at production outputs from Germany, they didn't actually reach their industrial output peak until 1944, when it appeared as though the outcome of the war was well decided. And yet the United States was already at its peak well before 1944 in terms of its industrial output, producing long-range bombers, tanks, and, of course, that incredible naval fleet that we've talked about on numerous occasions. Rapid expansion of industrial output. And like I said, despite the terrifying threat the United States faced, especially with a nuclear-armed Soviet Union, it never endeavored to match this industrial output at the end of World War II. There's also the peculiar detail with some of the colossal or gargantuan-sized weapons that Germany did actually develop and field during World War II, such as the Big Dora railway artillery gun, 800 millimeters. an incredible piece of equipment that was used during the siege of Sevastopol in the Crimea. The rounds being considered so large that it was very difficult to actually fire them. And yet this was a real piece of equipment that was used by Germany in World War II. Now the question that we always have is, why or how would any regime actually approve such a weapon if it was not going to be practical? The simple question would be, wouldn't it make a lot more sense, instead of building one very large gun, to just build 20 guns that had more of a decentralized capability, and therefore were also more survivable when you consider the efforts that the enemy would undergo to destroy them? There were even larger guns and armored fighting vehicles that Germany apparently had conceptualized during World War II, such as the Land Cruiser P-1500 Monster. And yes, I'm pronouncing it very directly for a reason. Can you even imagine the practicality of such a piece of equipment? And what would be the real purpose behind it? Well, after the war, it was stated it was merely the product of a megalomaniacal regime that simply wanted to build terror weapons that would frighten everyone into capitulation. Although these terror weapons didn't prove to be very effective, and they weren't very practical. And certainly when you look at the well-documented historical sources, that's indeed what many of the subordinate military commanders tried to inform the ruling body in Germany during World War II, that these wouldn't have been practical weapons. Yet another little interesting detail is that the German company Krupp produces the largest excavator in the world, or at least one of the largest excavators, with the Bagger 288. Now just imagine, could it be possible that this incredible excavator is merely a, how shall we say, smaller scale version of what may have existed in the past? If you ever pay attention to the excavation patterns from this particular excavator, you might notice that there are some much larger patterns in certain places, like for example Utah, that just tend to match its excavation patterns, very fortuitously, I'm sure. And of course we know that in Utah these are merely the products of natural forces such as erosion, aren't they always? But back to that original question, why did this concept, this initiative to try to build extremely large pieces of equipment that are totally impractical from our understanding continue to persist in Germany? Even the Panzer Mark 8, or the Maus tank, which German Panzer leader Hans Guderian said was not practical because it didn't even mount a coaxial machine gun, or any machine gun, at least for counter-infantry and close combat, which was the entire purpose of tanks. Yes, they were survivable being armored fighting vehicles, but you needed to use them in a counter-infantry role as well, and to support infantry. Why would anyone go to this extent to try to develop weapons such as these? Certainly someone would say they were impractical, and again the explanation will simply be, well, the regime was crazy. In fact, invading the Soviet Union was a crazy initiative. It had been done in the past and it was shown to be a terrible failure, such as Napoleon in Russia. And yet for some inexplicable reason, this concept, this nation that did effectively industrialize its entire military, and did in fact have technological advantages at the start of the war, was suddenly put on this path of utter destruction. Although we could just simply account this being the failed decisions of a regime that was not stable to begin with. And perhaps we could accept that. It's always one of those great problems, though, with the development of these heavy forging presses, because it gives us the clue that perhaps there was a greater technological application available. Now, step back and imagine if these gargantuan, colossal weapons that were being imagined were a little bit more practical. It's also more than a coincidence, I think, that the current main battle tank of the United States military, the venerable M1, A1, A2, A3, and who knows how many other variants of the Abrams battle tank, was based on a design initiative in conjunction with what was West Germany at the time, the main battle tank 70 as it was called. And to this day, the Abrams mounts a German-designed 120mm smoothbore cannon. But if these incredibly colossal vehicles were actually a practical reality, if there was just simply some technological breakthrough that was lacking to get them to be a practical application, what if that was really what was going on? What if there was a time and a place where a vehicle such as this would be practical? Now, we understand that our current understanding of the laws of physics indicate this would not be practical. It would simply sink into the ground. It wouldn't be possible to actually deploy an armored fighting vehicle such as this, and practical to support it. And imagine the logistical footprint just on a single one of these vehicles. So is this just merely the product of mad imagination of a regime that was bent on self-destruction, and yet they continued the pursuit of these initiatives? We understand that when we look at the very bizarre account of the technological advantages that the German military appeared to squander at the start of the war. Recall that the very first flight of the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter occurred in 1941, and yet official historical sources indicate that Germany did not produce this fighter in any number until 1944, again at the time when the outcome of the war was well decided. Why would there have been such a focus, though, to produce these incredibly large armored fighting vehicles? What if there was a practical application? Some component of technology that we didn't understand and were missing? Something that may have existed in the distant past, that may have made these colossal armored fighting vehicles more of a practical reality? Then could they have really been the decisive superweapons as we understand them to be? The very odd account of World War II was that that's exactly what the conflict appeared to be, was multiple sides trying to pursue a decisive weapon that would give them an advantage that could not be accounted for. But when you look at a lot of these images, and you even remember the fact that there are numerous well-documented sources that there were large weapons produced in Germany in World War II. But by the end of the conflict, we understand that the Germans could not produce them in a large enough quantity to make a difference in the conflict, whether it was on the Eastern Front, fighting the Soviet Union or the Red Army, or it was in the air over Germany, fighting the United States Army Air Force and the Royal Air Force at that time. But we go back to that original question of the heavy forging press. What exactly occurred that led to Germany to discover and utilize these incredible heavy presses? The official history says that as a result of the Treaty of Versailles in World War I, Germany was deprived the use of a lot of iron, and therefore it had to seek other metals to use, namely magnesium and aluminum. And suddenly, during the Weimar Republic period, Germany, engaging in creativity, developed these heavy forging presses. In the very early 1900s, the Wright brothers, who by the way did not have a high school degree, neither one of them, innovated and developed the very first heavier-than-air flying object, and thus the first flight was recorded at Kitty Hawk. It only lasted for 12 seconds, although it did not take the Wright brothers very long at all before they developed subsequent models that could fly longer, farther, and higher than their original glider. And 38 short years later, the Germans had developed the very first jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me-262. Really think about that. 38 years is not a long period of time whatsoever. And yet we have thousands of years of technological stagnancy that the human civilization had been embarked upon. And this includes all the different types of governments and societies that we've had, everything from dictatorships to absolute monarchies to feudalism, all of which had been unable to produce this incredible technology. The Roman Empire never had any industrial revolution. It never developed jet engines. And yet, in a very short amount of time, from 1900 to 1960, aviation technology went from its very incipience to, dare I say, one of the greatest advances, or one of the most unreal advances in human history. Now, is that simply because during this period of time we were more innovative and creative because of the nature of conflict? Or was there another explanation for it? Horton Ho 229, the flying wing design by Germany towards the end of World War II. At the time, it must have seemed like complete and total science fiction, perhaps even understandable to be misidentified as an unidentified flying object. Yet we understand that today, primary aviation designs for military application indicate that the flying wing is one of the most advanced types. And again, remember, this was only 4 short decades after the very first flight of the Wright brothers with a simple glider, a flight that only lasted 12 seconds. Again, this is one of those things that really causes me to question our understanding of how exactly we advanced so quickly. Why didn't any other civilization or power prior to the late 1700s have an industrial revolution? And why was it not until the very early 20th century that we understand, with the treaty that necessitated Germany to indulge and creatively explore the concept of the heavy press forge? It's a very interesting historical quandary that we tend to have. And a lot of individuals would never question it and simply accept it at face value. Well, there were conflicts, there were requirements, and the Weimar Republic in Germany certainly didn't undergo any economic turmoil. I'm being very sarcastic when I say that. In fact, the Weimar Republic in Germany was considered a very difficult time. The conditions were so horrible that that's what had warranted Germany falling into its unfortunate path with the government and the type of government that it embraced leading to World War II, because the Weimar Republic had so many problems. And yet, it was during the Weimar Republic that these heavy press forges were developed and implemented, a technology that was so far ahead of its time that both the United States and the Soviet Union were ensured to acquire it after World War II and adapt and employ it for their own purposes. Imagine what the United States military must have felt when they captured the components of the Horton Ho 229. Why is it then that the United States was taken completely by surprise when the Soviet Union fielded the advanced MiG? And think about this with the swept wing fighter designs. And during the Korean War, as we understand it, the employment of the MiG by Soviet air forces and stated to be used by North Korean and Chinese pilots completely overcame the Lockheed shooting stars that were available. The United States quickly had to field the Sabre. And then it was during the Korean War that the United States implemented this heavy press forging program to rapidly develop, build, and employ these incredible machines to build the components for more advanced fighter aircraft. Now, it should be noted that in present time, other nations, to include China and Russia, currently possess larger heavy press forges. But is there something more to this account? Is there something that we don't fully understand about this technology and how it was truly acquired? Is it possible that in certain areas of the land that this technology was actually founded or salvaged and pressed back into service? And as a result of locating this technology and being able to repair it and utilize it, that it led to a very different form of events than what we understand. Because it's intriguing to note that the United States didn't really seem to want to retain its industrial capacity output of World War II, or it didn't seem very interested in it. In fact, here we have this heavy press forge from Germany in World War II that is stated to still be functional today in Russia. Now that's some incredible technology. Imagine this piece of equipment built in Germany decades ago that was moved to Russia and is still functional today. I mean, could we build any sort of incredible technology, a large manufacturing facility that we could move? And we have numerous accounts of that. And let's not forget that during World War II, the Soviet Union and Russia were the masters of rapidly relocating heavy industry because apparently it was just that easy to do. Now, is that what really happened? Or do we have an entirely different account of events that we may not necessarily be aware of? It's ultimately up to you to decide, but I've always found the historical account of the advances of technology to be very unreal from 1900 onward. It's not to say that it's not possible, it's just to say that it seems very unlikely. Remember that during this time frame, the real key to success would be to use proven technological capabilities to rapidly produce that which could be quickly used during conflict and overwhelm your enemy. Of course, we have this very strange overlap of both innovation and creativity. Now, I don't know what the real answer is, but it's intrigued me for a very long period of time. And I'll admit that it's something that interested me long before I developed the mindset that I have right now. I'm not here to tell you exactly what to think, but I invite you to let me know what you think in the comments. What's the real story behind this technological advancement that we had and our rapid implementation of aviation advances? Let me know what you think in the comments. The intention behind this exploration is I'm following up on some of the early explorations that we did on the Industrial Revolution. Although we have multiple revolutions. We have the Industrial Revolution and we have the Technological Revolution. Well, what's the difference? Well, when you go off of the quote-unquote historicity or the history behind it, you'll find that the Industrial Revolution is the catch-all explanation of a time frame. Depending on what nation you're in, it varies. If you're in the United Kingdom, or what's today the United Kingdom, it started in the 1700s. If you're in the United States, it was primarily in the early 1800s, although that was the first Industrial Revolution, not to be confused with the Second Industrial Revolution. That's also called the Technological Revolution. So you can see that we have many names behind many different things. And we start by considering the Industrial and the Technological Revolution because it is the official historical explanation for how our civilization went from a state of technological stagnancy, or being stuck, despite the fact that the Romans were able to do some really impressive things. And even before this Industrial Revolution, we know that many other places, such as Florence, Bologna, Italy, did some very impressive things. Again, according to the official historical account, we explain the fact that the rest of the world went through this incredible revolution, and that's why we have the wondrous, incredible modern world that we do today. And what we're looking at right here in this particular image is the Barrow Steel Works. And this was part of the Second Industrial Revolution, or the Technological Revolution. Yes, it makes history simple when you have multiple names for the same period or the same era. I always found that rather comical. But in any event, the Barrow Steel Works. So we're looking at something that was developed and built, and you can see what an epic complex it is. Multiple smokestacks, incredible old world structures, and even a nice little fancy tower and an administration building, just the kind of stuff that you need, and was very easy to build in the 1800s. Whatever the story behind it, the official account says that this was when they started to standardize the production of steel, something that was required for the construction of the great technological implements that began the 20th century or the 1900s, and were put to use during both Great World Wars and the many subsequent regional conflicts that followed throughout the 1900s. But the Barrow Steelwork, impressive facility. But going back to the original Industrial Revolution, how do we explain it? Well, you might recall that they had the development of the Agricultural Revolution. And of course, this started in Great Britain, United Kingdom as well. So interestingly enough, the origin of these revolutions is all in the United Kingdom. And yet apparently the other nations managed to acquire this technology or this insider information and take it further, such as the United States' rapid development of the railway. But what we have here is the screw cutting lathe, one of the very first basic machine tools that was developed at the end of the 1700s in the United Kingdom. Look around you. Can you construct some kind of rudimentary lathe? If anybody knows what film that's from, I'm impressed. But this was the basic machine tool that started the other machine tools and enabled the eventual standardization of production. So that's what the official historical account says. Now, from that, we also have the rise of the vast textile mills. That was another implement of the Industrial Revolution. So you manage to develop agriculture, and that's how you sustain your population. You've got more people that are surviving to the age of 30. Again, according to the official historical account, they need clothes, so you need textiles. So you need the ability to mass produce things, and therefore you have your textiles. And finally, you also have the modern blast furnaces, or at least the ability to rapidly heat and, again, part of standardization, have the ability to rapidly produce iron. At least that's what we're informed. And these incredible blast furnaces were the way to do that, the hot blast process, as it was called. An essential feature in metallurgy, in which case you could suddenly manage to manufacture these advanced materials. At least, again, that's what we're told in the official historical account. Although this is well after all of these incredible stone and mason constructions that we've looked at when these processes were standardized. So is it all to be taken at face value, or is it something to be questioned? I thought it was important that we review this account. But what are your thoughts on the Industrial and Technological Revolution? Queen Peachy Keen, quite very impressive, exactly, as it's supposed to be. So, KC933, how'd they make glass and whatnot before this? Good question. And again, it's something that's a little bit of a hand wave explanation, because you're absolutely right. The Crystal Palace was made well before the technological revolution, when things were standardized. Now, granted, you could make the argument that things weren't, or you could make the argument that things were standardized a little bit more than we realized, but, you're really balancing a fine act there in terms of how to actually explain it. And so that's what really makes it quite intriguing. Because what came first? You have the proverbial saying, the chicken or the egg. Well, what came first? Iron or steel? The accounts are that iron came first, and then they managed to refine the process and produce steel. But, yeah, Watchman says it best. Nothing new under the sun. Nothing new under the sun, because you're not necessarily inventing anything. You're salvaging things. And maybe that's how you explain this. Maybe that's how you explain how those upstart Americans got ahead of the British. Or maybe everybody was just all working under some sort of timeline. Who knows for sure? It's all speculation, because I did not personally witness it, just to be clear on that. But that's the difference, the Industrial and Technological Revolution. So now you know the official historical account, and no, it was not a fun lesson to teach, but very imperative. Now, what you have here is the very first iron bridge, and I know British viewers go ahead and destroy me for this pronunciation, because I've always wrecked it. Shropshire, England, constructed in 1781. And this was the very first iron bridge. Remember, 1781, so early portion of the Industrial Revolution, not the technological revolution that came after the U.S. Civil War. And you may notice that, yes, there's iron in this, but what are the main supports of this bridge? It doesn't look like iron to me, does it? Yes, it's more of that masonry construction, yet if we look a little more closely, there seems to be a little bit more of an advanced component to it, doesn't it? Don't worry, we're going to be looking at an even older bridge than this that's actually in the United States, surprisingly enough. And this is a bridge that you can still drive across today in Pennsylvania on a highway. But this is considered the first iron bridge in England, constructed 1781. And so that's really the explanation that we have behind the Industrial and the Technological Revolution. Thoughts so far? Oh, that's a good one. Concrete evidence. Yeah, absolutely. Well, hello there. Hope everything's going well on the other side of the pond. And by all means, have fun with my pronunciations. I'm definitely not a Gordy. Let me assure you I'm not a Gordy. So, Hey, New West Reset. Good to see you. If I didn't say hi already. So, Oh, that's a good one, Michael. The rooster came before the chicken and the egg. You know what? While I know you mean that in a facetious way, I think there's actually some elements of truth in that. So, revolution is defined as a violent or forcible overthrow. Very true, Kitch. Very true. And yet, it's not limited to just industrial or technological processes. You'll hear all kinds of terms of revolution bandied about. For example, they have this concept called revolution in military affairs, and then they have the military revolution. Example, Napoleon committed a military revolution with mass mobilization, drafting large armies and then capturing capitals. At least until other nations figured it out, allied, and stopped him. So the official history goes. Did Napoleon exist? I don't know, I wasn't there. Ooh, Sky Sage. Yeah, it is some nice lattice work on it, isn't it? Something that we really don't see with iron construction. I mean, yes, we have iron and steel construction now, but we tend to make it very utilitarian, very blasé, and yet this has an artistic appeal to it. So that's the overview of these revolutions. Let us go on to the steam engine and power sources, because you need to have power to get this revolution going. So give me one moment here, and we shall go to our steam engine, which is the essential element of the Industrial Revolution. Stop screen, start screen, share screen, and you should see this Little animation right here. Isn't this nice? You have to love these little animated GIFs showing you exactly how the steam engine works in action with the giant wheel. No, never too late at all, so. That lattice is what finite element analysis algorithms now call automated topology based on stress-strain properties of material. Indeed. You know what the other thing you see there, Aether Topo Billy, is you tend to get a lot of terminology that gets layered on top of things, no matter what discipline we're actually talking about. That's something else that I try to make a lot of a study on and try to understand how things are layered. What's the origin of terms? Why do we pronounce things the way that we do? Because a lot of people are keen about pronunciations. Oh, RB, yes, Looney Tunes taught me about steam engines. You and me both. And yes, they had some great ways of showing it in cartoons. So, anyway. So the steam engine, how to develop the power source. Well, what's the actual history behind these very incredible steam engines? How exactly do they work? Why do they work? Does anybody know when the first steam engine was invented? At least the first thing that we consider the steam engine. And if you've watched some explorations before, you probably know the answer to this question. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't during the Industrial Revolution. Well, atom bomb. Linguistics is layered just like our infrastructure. Yes, and much like our historical accounts, our politics, our corporate methods of operation, everything is nice and layered, isn't it? It all makes perfect sense. Keep it simple. Our history academia shows us a forced takeover, says Kitsch. Absolutely right, so... So anyway, getting back to the original question, how exactly did this all start? You have the Aeolopile. Back from, yes, you guessed it, that time before. I'm surprised they don't attribute this to Eratosthenes or Aristophanes or however we're pronouncing his name today. You know, the guy who figured out the circumference of the world back before the Library of Alexandria was burned. So again, this is attributed to those Hellenistic times, and the concept of the steam engine has been with us for 2,000 years, 1,900 years, depending what historical sources you look at. Now, yes, this is just a drawing, but apparently they had this design for a very long time. The very rudimentary steam engine. And not some guy in Galaxy Quest saying you need to build a rudimentary steam engine to get off the alien planet before the rock monster kills you. There, I gave you a hint to that quote from earlier. This is apparently a practical model of it. But I find it fascinating that the official historical account tells us that we had a rudimentary steam engine from the time of the library in Alexandria. Now, when exactly was this? Who knows? Yes, official historical accounts say 1 AD, 1 BC, whatever time frame you want to look at. I mean, the whole thing is circa anyway, so how they could possibly know this, especially after the Library of Alexandria was burned, which always leaves that question, how exactly did they find Eratosthenes' work? But never mind that. They said they did. Who are we to question it, right? But they had this rudimentary steam engine for hundreds of years, but no kind of technological revolution at that time. The Romans never employed a steam engine, according to official history. They built this incredible empire. They had all these incredible domes and columns, but never developed a steam engine, never achieved any kind of industrial revolution. Yes, of course, it's some great speculation and alternate history if they did. But you look at how the steam engine just really languished in, what we might consider development hell. We've got many films that are in development hell these days, and apparently the steam engine languished in technological development hell for hundreds of years. Now, gradually in the 1700s, again, things all starting to overlap, they began to implement some improvements, different inventors from completely different areas, although most of them from the United Kingdom or Great Britain at the time. They were the ones who apparently started to refine the steam engine. Until finally we come across this particular individual, Richard Trevithick, or Trevithick, depending on how you pronounce his name. And here it looks like he's pointing in the distance there. I'm going to run a railway track over that hill because that's an easy thing to do. Never mind James May's presentation on tractive force and why it's very difficult for trains to go up hills. But apparently he was the one, according to the official historical account in the early 1800s, he invented the first steam engine, the first locomotion. And here you can see he had this little steam circus, as he called it, where he was trying to showcase that the steam engine that he had invented could be faster than a horse. and they charged admission for this, but apparently it wasn't a very successful event, and he was discouraged and off he went. But still, he was attributed as the first person who invented this thing. Of course, right? Okay, Chassis, that's got to be the comment of the night right there. Well, you know, you always have these individuals, these incredible revolutionary thinkers who come out of the blue and they come up with all these new concepts for locomotion and other means of transportation. So, Mr. Wynn there, don't look successful. Yeah, precisely. There you go, Adam Bomb. Yeah, what's that over there? Just take a look. Anyways, so that's the official account behind it, and here you're looking at a drawing of the initial high-pressure steam engine that he invented, and this was from refining the earlier designs that had just been sitting around throughout hundreds of years and improving it. Now, I will give a little bit of credit here, though, or maybe I should say a little bit of less skepticism. This almost seems like it's a more credible story, a more credible account that, yes, they slowly developed the steam engine over time. But as usual, they never went anywhere with it until the 1800s, that magical century when anything and everything could be done and achieved. Now, unfortunately, good old Richard, he passed away, and much like our good friend, no, I'm not going to say his name, but, our previous friend, Nikolai Tesla, Richard ended up dying in a hotel. He was penniless, just like Tesla. But he's still very well remembered. And even though they were penniless, both of them managed to stay in a hotel. So I don't know, maybe because they were so famous, they were offered free hotel accommodations. I'm not really sure. But Richard's got this nice little plaque here that commemorates his contributions to technology, and he's not forgotten. The great engineer and pioneer of high-pressure steam. We've got I don't know if you'd even call this a plaque. This actually looks like a concrete piece that's been inscribed upon. So a little bit more than a plaque. So, maybe they do hold him in high regard. But, just like Nikola Tesla, he died, and although granted Tesla was penniless too, but he got a big state funeral. So, I don't know. How unknown was he? Depends on who you ask. So that's the story behind the steam engine, and then they've got this really nice statue of him. Well, he looks so impressive there with his one arm forward, and oh, look at that, he's got his leggings on and his really nifty shoes. Nice old world buildings behind him too. It's quite the statue. But, the pioneer, the innovator. And then we have to go later in the 1800s, though, before we continued to refine it. Now, there were other refinements to the steam engine for power sources, but we have to go to 1884 with this individual, Charles Algernon Parsons, another incredible British inventor. And in 1884, he was the one who put together the modern steam turbine, the steam turbine that we still use to this day. Now, this is an actual steam turbine that he constructed for the community of Elberfeld in Germany in 1900. Now, this is very peculiar if you step back and you look at what was historically going on at that time. In 1900, you had the German Empire and you had the British Empire, and they were in a state of competition. You had this little thing going on called colonization for competing for minimal resources in Africa, so the official account says. You had these nations in an arms race at that time. And then eventually World War I would break out. You had the Kaiser, and he was not too fond of the British monarchy, and so on and so forth. So there's conflicting accounts. There's accounts that said that they were in an arms race, but then they tried to make diplomatic processes. It doesn't make any sense, though, for Britain or the United Kingdom or the British Empire to actually provide somebody to build a 1 megawatt generator for a town in the German Empire in 1900. It really doesn't. It would sort of be like if the United States invented some new technological device and then said, yes, we're going to go build this in China or Russia or North Korea. That's an even better example. And we're just going to do it here now. Of course, the United States would actually have to invent something that's revolutionary right now. And, we just aren't doing it right now. Well, maybe we'll get around to it. But anyways, back to the historical example. It doesn't really make a lot of sense if you step back and you put it in the so-called historical context. There you go, Sky Sage. Wow, exactly. Just out of nowhere, the steam turbine refined from nothing. The sheer size of the iron castings from those times is quite disturbing. It's a good point there, Reno. And we'll take a look at some of the scale of this construction that they had as well. So, Sean, they conjured it from nowhere, but nothing before that for thousands of years. Exactly. It's a familiar theme. You can really just use that to describe the entire 1800s. conjured from nowhere, from nothing, for hundreds or thousands of years. That's the 1800s in a lot of ways. And so this is the same model of the turbine that is used to this day. This is a steam turbine at a nuclear plant. Now, whatever your thoughts on nuclear power, and you can certainly watch the miniseries Chernobyl and listen to Professor Legasov tell Boris exactly how a nuclear power plant works, but it all still revolves around steam turbines. The same steam turbines that came from good old Mr. Charles Parsons, not of Alan Parsons' project. But yeah, he's a very intelligent looking individual. I like the glasses too. And, not slamming about the massive amounts of facial hair like Americans did in the U.S. Civil War, but, he was a refined gentleman, I guess. Now, this also led to the revolution in shipbuilding. Now, you might recall that in the 1800s, and we'll look at shipbuilding a little bit more closely because that's the other thing that's interesting about this. This is Her Majesty's ship, the Dreadnought. Finished, constructed, and launched circa 1906. And I say circa because I don't know. That's what the official historical account says. But this is really the first modern warship. And in fact, modern warships to this day continue to follow this design. Now, granted, they say that the battleship is obsolete because of the aircraft carrier. But you think about what a revolution this really was. What a change in design this was from just a few years before this. They still had cannons. I mean, the Civil War was only 40 years before this when they were using ironclads and cannons. But because of these turbines that Parsons had designed, they were able to drive incredibly large ships like this at reasonable speeds. Now, yeah, you're talking low 20 knots, not very fast, but comparatively speaking, it was much faster than what had come before, all because of the steam turbine. And then there's other examples of it, such as this industrial boiler, the stationary steam engine, if you will. Something very peculiar looking about it, though, and if you walk around, you'll find that there's still examples of this older technology, still intact. I mean, imagine our modern technology. I mean, what would we make a steam engine or a turbine out of today if we built one? It's a compilation of plastic and some other form of very cheap material, because remember, we're very, very cheap. We're cost effective. We have regulations. We have environmental considerations. They didn't have that back then, so they had advantages. That's the official explanation that we get. But you'll find examples of it. Here we have a pumping engine. I think this is in Belgium or the Netherlands. I'm trying to remember the exact location. But yeah, nice little castle building, big smokestack, and it's something about it seems a little bit more advanced than we might expect. And again, we never have anything in the Industrial Revolution about masonry construction or the vast rapid production of bricks, because according again to the official historical account, we built incredible structures such as that wonderful cathedral in Florence, Italy, well before even the Renaissance, to say nothing of the Industrial Revolution, so we kind of can't really say anything about that. They could already do it, just assume they could. You didn't need trains to haul around the bricks, you just had horses, and that's all you needed, horses and carts. Now this gets even more interesting though. So we've jumped around from the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s to the Technological Revolution in the late 1800s. But one of the questions I got asked was, when was the first automobile invented? The first practical automobile, to quote Lieutenant Worf from Star Trek The Next Generation. The individual that you're looking at here in this picture, this drawing or this painting, whatever you want to call it, colorized drawing, maybe that's the way to say it, Ferdinand Verbiest, or Verbiest if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and I'm probably not. He was a Flemish Jesuit from the Society of Jesus missionary who operated in China. Now, for those who aren't familiar, Flemish are an ethnic group in Belgium of Germans. At least that's what the official historical account says. Who knows for sure? He lived from 1620 to the late 1680s, and he went over to China and convinced the Chinese emperor that European astronomy and astrological charts were superior to the Chinese. In fact, according to the official historical account, he corrected the Chinese calendar. I'm serious, they actually say this happened. This guy who was a Jesuit did all this. And you see there's all these pictures of him with these very advanced astronomical instruments. Okay, what the heck does this have to do with automobiles? Well, bear with me for a second. So apparently he constructed this elaborate array of these unique astronomical instruments, and this is why the Chinese just thought he was the best thing since sliced bread, apparently. And apparently there's even a picture of some of the remnants of this incredible facility, this Whatever you want to call it. I mean, observatory, maybe. I mean, it's really, really strange to me. But, you see a little bit of the amalgamation of technology. You have what you would associate with symbols in China, with the dragons and everything. But who knows for sure what's going on? It's just a picture. I don't. But he also had some really cool maps that he apparently produced. This one attributed from 1674. And you know how we like looking at world maps here. And oddly enough, this seems to be an accurate world. Oh, look at this. Once again, showing land up there in the North Polar region. Well, if the Jesuit was doing it, if the guy who helped the Chinese correct their calendar, because remember, their calendar wasn't correct until this Flemish guy went over there and showed them. Yeah, right. Anyways, you can see, though, that on this interesting depiction of all the land, he shows land up there in the North Polar region. Very, very odd. Also shows, well, actually, it looks like it's not an island here because according to this, there's land that connects the mighty magical land of California and the United States. And I think we got some Great Lakes here, or maybe one giant lake. Maybe that was Lake Super Superior, and then it divided up into the other lakes. I know I'm having a little bit of fun with this one, but sometimes you have to. And then, we've got all kinds of animals and critters down there on Antarctica. I guess you knew about Antarctica. Or you remember they called it Terra Incognita because Captain Cook didn't go down there to confirm there was no Terra Incognita Australis or whatever they called it, but he missed finding the Antarctica. So, make of it what you will. Oh, good. I'm glad you appreciated that one. Sometimes I can pull a good one from the top of my hat. So, oh, yeah. Yeah, Antarctic animals. I guess he didn't know about the polar bears or penguins. I don't think there's polar bears down there. No, I thought they were north, but it's okay. Maybe there are polar bears down there. It's all good. But yes, this was the map that this Flemish Jesuit missionary designed for the Chinese emperor in the 1600s. And then last but not least, in 1678, he's attributed to have invented this original steam machine. And it's considered the first automobile. Now, granted, it was just a model, but apparently this guy, who was a Flemish Jesuit missionary operating in China, he invented this thing. And this is the first automobile. So, if you're Worf, you can get in the holodeck and you can try jumping on this thing with your batleth and, fighting the holodeck monsters. But this is attributed to be the very first automobile. Now, let's think about this. We just reviewed the fact that we had most of the implementations of steam power and advancements conducted in the late 1700s, refined in the 1800s. Yet there is also an official historical account of a steam machine by some Jesuit missionary in China in the 1600s. That was the first automobile, operated on steam power. The hell you say? Yeah, that's what the official historical account says. So what are your thoughts on that? RV. Wait, they were building whole star cities, but this was supposedly top tech? Well, absolutely. And I'm surprised he didn't take that over as well, maybe he was just a little short on it, so. Oh, there you go, Atom Bomb. Yeah, trying to put it in reverse. Yeah, I don't know how practical or effective it was, but there are historical accounts that said that he did this, that he pulled this off, so, as always. Yeah, there you go, KC933. Shenanigans. It is shenanigans, isn't it? But what to really make of it? Were they finding and repurposing technology in different locations? Was it a salvage? Yeah, not really sure. It seems to go in different directions at the same time. Yeah, Chassis, and it depends. Some classes actually covered it, at least back when I was still teaching, because it was considered one of the big revolutionary things. What's the origin of the automobile? In fact, I even remember the entire lesson plan on automobiles. The first chapter was actually about this thing. Wasn't a very long chapter, because it's not very well documented, much like the life of Roman Emperor Lucius Aurelian, but they said it happened. Why would anybody make something up, right? Who knows? Who knows for sure? Reno, how did they refill that thing? Good question. Maybe you just poured water up there in the sphere and that's how it operated. Or maybe it operated on some completely different principle. So, not really sure. SS. Is that a rudder wheel? Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's how you steered it. You just kind of, you swung it around with your hands and that's how you steered it? I mean, no idea. They say it's a model, but very, very, very odd. And so that's the entire history of steam power, apparently. Yes, all back to that car. But let's take a look at some other examples here real quick before we move on. And be prepared because this gets even stranger. So, showing you these particular images. And what you have here, the interior of a power plant, transfer water from above the dam to water wheels. That's what they say these are. Interior of the powerhouse, High Falls. Now, this photo is attributed to the late 1800s when they had this kind of technology. And you see the steam generators, and you actually see the entire apparatus of machinery here. Now, where things get a little, how should we say, obfuscated or confused, was again, how exactly are you manufacturing all of this heavy equipment and moving it from place to place? And when did it start? Now, oddly enough, the timeline gets very, very compressed. It's a very short timeline from the implementation of this brand new technology to suddenly being able to rapidly employ it. And not just in a single nation, but in multiple nations at the same time, and pull off a very rapid standardization. Oh, by the way, they pulled off this rapid standardization when a computer was a human being. You know, typically a lady who was doing calculations, because you might remember we had the account of the lady who figured out the whole concept of different stars to figure out how far stars are from our current planet. Again, if you believe in that perception. But all very, very interesting that this is how it all started. Ah, yes, and the development of hydropower. Now, this is part of the great project for the Shannon River in Ireland, when the Free State of Ireland in 1920 said, we need to have massive hydroelectric power plants. And just to give you an idea on the size of this thing, you got a couple individuals right here. Now, granted, this is 1920, but again, a very compressed timeline. You know, with the advent of railroads and being able to use rail technology, heavy equipment, heavy transportation. Also consider heavy machinery, because the timeline on heavy machinery is quite constrained. They say they developed the combine in 1890 and the first steam-powered excavation machines and heavy lift capability, that was early 1900s. Although there's conflicts to that. You also have excavators from the 1800s. We'll look at one of those. So what's really true? I don't know. I wasn't there. But it is rather odd how compressed it all is, how quickly it all is. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm certainly not saying that. But I am saying that it seems very improbable. It seems very unlikely that somebody was able to rapidly develop and then rapidly employ all this technology in a very proficient manner in a very short amount of time. Just think on the time it would have taken to train different contractors or the people actually constructing these incredible machines, these amazing generators, and just get an idea for the scale of this. Imagine all the tech below our cities, cemeteries, and golf courses. Yeah, and there's probably a lot to be found there, Michael, no doubt about it. Ah, Chuck. Steam shovels were 1850s. Yes, that's exactly what they say. But what was really the capability behind these steam shovels? And yet, it's odd that we don't have accounts of steam shovels actually digging all those incredible trenches that they used in the United States Civil War. So it's really the mother of all conflicting accounts. They say they had them, they say they invented them, but how effective were they? So how could they actually apply them? Newers, did you see those Alice Chambers hydro turbines in that collection? I've actually got something for you. We're going to take a look at Keokuk and that nice dam there, because they've got some incredible hydroelectric generators there. Ah, Space Fraggle. Technology equals Prometheus fire. That's right. I could just hear you saying, give me Prometheus fire. I want it. Okay, sorry, not doing a very good Christopher Lloyd tonight. So, anyway. Hey, Wendy, well, good to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Auto hoax. The Iowa Battleship's power plant is an incredible achievement. How fortuitous you're talking about battleships. We are going to get back to that, so. Anyways, so you have these. And then, of course, you also have the more advanced lathe, because we went from that very rudimentary lathe to the more advanced lathe. Now, having the lathe gives you the capability to form metal, to develop metal shapes. And that's one of the essential features to building the amazing battleships, to building the amazing hydroelectric plants. Again, all in a short amount of time. Now, when was the more advanced lathe developed? Not really sure. There's conflicting accounts on it. Now, you can certainly look it up and you can believe what they tell you and not ask any questions about it. And you know what? Maybe it's right. I can't say it's not because, like I said, I wasn't there. But there are a lot of questions that it raises that are quite intriguing. And then you can find these hydroelectric plants that just seem to come up all over the place. There were many of them all over the land constructed from 1900 to 1920. And in fact, many of these hydroelectric plants are still in operation today. In fact, many of these dams that were built well over 100 years ago are still in operation today. You know, aside from the one or two that tend to fail, like the one in Minnesota that did this last summer and caused a massive flood. That thing was well over 100 years old. So it begs the question, you know, with the Great Depression and everything else that happened from the early 1900s until now, no one's ever thought or wanted to build newer infrastructure with more modern technology. We've certainly improved our heavy machines. And oh, by the way, this was done before the highway system, before the interstate system, before motorized and mechanized transportation, because that's how you would explain the last mile, unless you just want to believe you hauled this all here with trains. I mean, yeah, you can say that, but how many times can you say that? How many times can you say, oh, yeah, the trains just did it? Can trains go uphill? Well, watch that video by James May. They can, but not very well, and it's a very limited slope, which is why I had to laugh when someone said, it was easy for the horses to pull the trolley across the rails in Milwaukee. Why? Why would you bother with it? Just have the horses pull a wagon, you can go anywhere. What's the point of building a trolley on the tracks that the horses have to pull? It's a waste of time and resources, that's my point. But whatever, you know, maybe, but, you know, make of it what you will. It's like thinking of a flying bike in your head when the most technologically advanced device your people have is throwing sharpened sticks. Well, and that's a great one there, Break Marble Batch. It's exactly what we're expected to believe happened. Oh, thank you so much for that new West Reset. I appreciate the memberships, and welcome to the new members. So, and good to see you again, if I didn't already say that, which I'm sure I did, but, you know, just be sure. And so that's what they tell us. Steam engine and power sources. That's how we powered this incredible machine. That's how we brought all this about. And how much of this was already there and we just don't know it? That's where things get conflicted, Anne. Maybe a lot of it was already there and we just don't know it. Maybe none of it was. It had to be rebuilt. It had to be reassembled, and they had the people that did that. So, hey, Space Fraggle, thank you very much for that. So, in Troy, yes, you are correct. You are correct. So, let's go from that to take a look at the great ships. Yes, this is quite an interesting account that we're going to look at now. Now, I've got a little bit of an interesting story to start this one off for you. Let me get this one up. Now, what you are looking at here is another one of those great innovations from Victorian times. And why are we starting with this? Because this is quite a clue. This is what is called a convict hulk, or a prison hulk. You might have heard of accounts in certain films or books about how prisoners during the Victorian era were held on old sailing ships whose hulls had been converted to prisons. And in fact, there's even accounts of prisoners of war from the Revolutionary War being held on prison hulks. Andrew Jackson, for example, was stated to have been held prisoner on a prison hulk. That's why he despised the British so much, apparently. And was also one of the very few American commanders in the War of 1812 who could actually win battles. You know, that was a very rare quality at that time. But, you know, the right ones could win the right battles and get that stalemate. But enough of that. Anyways, there was this account that they used these old hulks of all these ships that the British Navy had, or the British Merchant Marine, or whatever you want to call it at that time, the Royal Navy, and they repurposed them to hold prisoners or convicts or people for other reasons. Ah, yes, another one of those wonderful gifts from those strange Victorian times, because as if that's not dystopian enough, well, here's another example for you. And just imagine these kind of conditions. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, these are all just drawn pictures. I mean, these all just seem like stories. Did this really happen? Here's something I want you to think about. Let's think about the fact that if this account is true, could this be pointing to something else that happened? You have all these hulls of ships without the masts that are stuck in harbors. Could it possibly represent something else happening? What are your thoughts on that? Refurbished. PJCC West, never enough carpenters and especially boat rights. Yeah, exactly. But there always seemed to be plenty of everything back in that time frame, wasn't there? Prisoners, pirate planet, prison planet? Yeah, that might be one way to look at it. Or could it have been survivors, possibly? Survivors returning to a land like we saw in there you go, New West Reset. Yeah, Great Flood. Much like that, I won't say anything bad about it, but it was shown in that 2012 film, the same concept. You know, that movie 2012 that came out in 2009. I think it was 2009. Yeah, another one of those Roland Emmerich specials. Yes. But just think about that. Did that actually happen with these hulks? Yeah. Atom Bomb says it. Could it have been something from the mud flood, a water flood, or some other event where everybody went out to sea to survive? Is that a possibility? Chassis, this looks like something someone who didn't know what they were doing made. Yeah, that comes up a lot, doesn't it? Brian, how much power do you think you could pull from the ether with that 200-foot antenna? Probably a lot more than that 1 megawatt generator could, but that's just my guess. So, anyways. Yeah, or a series of modern arcs, or at least from the last reset. Maybe that's what this represents. Hey, Christine, think of the acres of hemp you'd have to grow to outfit a ship. Well, it's a good point. That's a very good point. So, hey, World Underworld, thanks. I appreciate that. I hope you're doing well. But anyway, this is this account from the Victorian times, and there's lots of drawn pictures of it. And they even have cross-sections that show how they repurposed the ship into these convict ships. Now, this is where the story takes a little bit of a darker turn, because what was really going on here? We have prisoners, people held against their will on these prison hulks. Now, were they prisoners of war? Were they convicts? Were they all these unfortunate refugees from society, or these people who were miscreants who just simply couldn't fit in? Or were these survivors? Were these people who'd been picked up from someplace? Or again, were they tricked into going out there being told you were going to survive, and how long were they out at the ocean for? I mean, that's really where the thought gets disturbing. Imagine having to be out at the ocean with limited provisions or virtually none, and everyone's starving for months or years. I mean, that's the disturbing part of the story, because you look at these hulks and you get this impression that this might have been going on for a lot longer. And yes, there are actual photographs that show that this really did happen. Now, again, you know, photograph is not final definitive proof, but it's a clue that yes, there were these prison hulks, or these convict hulks, or whatever you want to call these, that really did exist. A very disturbing and unsettling possibility. Gilligan and Skipper too. Yeah, maybe that's where that came from, so. Oh, there you go. Granola grin. Still looks better than a Carnival cruise ship. Yeah, we won't talk about events 4 years ago, but yeah, that kind of crossed my mind when you said that, I will admit, so. Jody, the mysterious sea people. Maybe that's where that reference comes from. Maybe, again, it's on a much more compressed timeline than we realized. That all these events happened a lot closer together than we think. So, anyway. Sean P. There were ships with cathedrals on them, too. Oh, yeah. And it gets stranger the more you look into it with what their capabilities actually were. So, and, well, that's a question for another time, but it is a good question, so ask me again at some point, so. Yeah, the Love Boat, maybe that's where that concept came from, so. But anyway, when I see things like this, you know, and someone mentioned the London Fire, I'm not highlighting it, but that's okay. When I see things like this, that does give you the impression, the clue, the hint that it is a compressed timeline. Maybe we're not talking hundreds of years here. Maybe we're talking just a few decades. That's where things get very disturbing. And you might realize that it's becoming more difficult for us to directly verify events that occurred even prior to World War II. The Great Depression is becoming more problematic to verify with first-hand accounts. Now, of course, yes, we've got pictures, we got records, and if you trust them. Now, I wanted to show this. This is what they were building in Great Britain, the United Kingdom, contemporaneously in the Victorian times for a prison. This is Newgate Prison. Oh yes, a nice old world building, lots of great stones. So apparently they could build really nice prisons, the big castles that we're more familiar with, the incredible old world buildings. So why on earth did we need to have prison hulks then? I mean, it just really doesn't make any sense when you really try to think about it. I mean, if you have a bunch of prisoners, then you just put up a tent. Or if, there were no rights back then, there were no considerations of human welfare, there were no laws. So just, build a big pen and put them in there, like cattle. I mean, they say that's how they treated people. So what's the point of using the prison hulks? I mean, you could use the lumber for something else. It's really strange. And there's really no way to justify it from a logical perspective. Now, of course, you could say, well, since when were governments logical? Logic doesn't exist anymore. Look at how they show the Vulcans in 21st century Star Trek. They're not logical anymore. They're all insane and violent. Oh, did I just say that out loud? Yeah, I guess I did. And then looking at Newgate Prison, and it looks like we actually have multiple perspective plans here. Well, actually, it's single perspective, and then the facade is shown. But they say that they could build prisons like that at the same time. But yet we still needed to use convict ships, prison ships, because everybody was getting in trouble in the Victorian era, apparently. Yes, and then you have this really disturbing painting here that shows you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Just think about that. Just sitting on this hulk for some indefinite portion of time, stuck in the harbor. I mean, you really would rather be in a dungeon. And they talk about how horrifying the conditions were during this time. Stuck in the heat, and of course the humidity is going to be really high, and all the other unfortunate health issues. And even the American prisoners of war that they talked about that were kept in the prison ships, as they called them, during the U.S. Revolution, they suffered horrifying conditions. There was apparently a monument that was dedicated in the early 1900s, and of course by then, the United States and the United Kingdom were big-time friends already. So, they kept the kids' gloves on. We're not going to blame the British for doing this because we're friends now. Yeah, that's what the official historical account says. But, and I'm not pointing any fingers because from my perspective, this seems like there's something else entirely different going on than these being prison ships, whether they were for convicts. Oh, and before I forget, thinking of our numerous Australian viewers, think about the whole colonization of Australia. And there's statements that there were prison ships down in Australia, and, Australia was a penal colony. Well, was it, or was all the lands were they considered a penal colony? I mean, that's what they tell us. What's the difference? I don't really know. But you think about those, again, overlapping accounts and what they could be pointing to. Submarines by the look of it. Yeah, those always crop up in odd places, don't they? I wonder. We have seen submarines in strange places, haven't we? Let's take a closer look. Yeah, I'm not sure. Very, very odd. It's a good observation. Maybe it's just some, I don't want to think of what terrifying thing it could be, but it's a painted picture. It could be anything, but yeah, it's very, very odd. Anyways, I think before we go on to the Great Eastern, I'm pushing time here because I'm having a lot of fun. Oh, hey, Space Fraggle. Thank you so much, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate all of you being here. And before we go on our first break, be sure you hit the like button before we get to the Great Eastern, or maybe I'll just plow on through. So I'll just take a quick break here to hit the like button, and we'll just keep going, because I'm just having a good time. And the Great Eastern is very interesting to talk about. We'll get to a break, don't worry, but, when you're with the momentum, you go with it. Life is like that. I'm not a computer and I'm not an AI, no matter how much we'll assist otherwise. But please hit the like button and support the channel. I appreciate it. So we go to the Great Eastern. And you might remember that we talked about this particular ship when we were looking at the laying of the Great Transatlantic Cable. Now, this ship was constructed in the 1850s, and you might remember we studied it very thoroughly. We have some images of it. What's interesting about this ship is it was the largest in the world by far until 1899. And yet it was a paddle wheeler. There were different accounts on powering it. It was this big lumbering ship. The construction photos, though, are quite interesting. Ah, yes. And while the construction's going on, we, of course, have the individual at the top hat because, why wouldn't we? Chuck, you got to remember the same backroom kind of deals that go on today with governments and corporations and people get rich, and the same grifts went on then, too. Yes, I suppose you do, but did they happen the same way, or did they happen a different way? Or have things always been the same? I don't know. And maybe we need to remove the whole term grift from the lexicon, because I always think of Griff from Back to the Future, but that's just me. So make of it what you will. Ah, Kathy, yes, the Mad Hatter. Where would you be without that? Hey, Shake, yeah, boss man overseeing the job. That's right, personally. It looks like he's just having a good old time there. But there's a lot of curious construction photos of this very, very impressive ship. Oh, I like this here. Science photo library. Yeah, it's a science photo. And what's exactly going on back here? I mean, are these oil derricks or towers or something? I mean, this is supposed to be the port where they constructed this, but... And as usual, we just have everybody kind of standing around and lollygagging, as they'd say in the military, so not really sure. But then you've got some other images that, again, 1850s, you would think someone would document this all the way from the construction of the bare bones keel of this, instead of having these construction photos where it looks like they're just building an outer hull. I'm not sure. It's rather odd. And of course, we have the usual faded element of the photo, so who's to know, who's to say? You do get the idea that whatever the heck this is, it's very large, so the colossal size holds up. And here you can actually see the Great Eastern in its entire glory in 1866, and a couple other boats, that's two other boats that are right by it. I mean, there was no ship in the world that compared to this, according to the official account. And its main mission that it ended up being used for was laying the transatlantic cable, which, nobody to this day questions. And it enables the rapid communication between the United States and Queen Victoria. When James Buchanan sent the Morse code message to Queen Victoria saying, "How are you doing today?" Well, James, I think you need to get on top of that Civil War. Don't worry about the Constitution. You need to preserve the Union. She should have told him that. Maybe he would have taken more decisive action. He would have burned the Constitution down and would have been remembered as the greatest president. But for some reason, James Buchanan didn't do it. Should have listened to Queen Victoria. Oh well. But you look at some of these other images, and they're very curious. Very, very curious. And again, we've got the individuals with the cool hats that are just kind of standing around. I mean, is work going on here, or is everybody just posing for a picture? And I mean, when you look at this kind of image, it almost gives you the impression that, hey, we just kind of walked upon this big giant hull of a ship here. What are we going to do with it? I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm merely saying it gives you that impression, doesn't it? Yeah, exactly, Sean. They tell us they dismantled it afterwards. You're absolutely right. So, oh yeah, I mean, just an incredible wheel, an incredible colossal size that we wouldn't see officially until later in the 1800s. So, do you remember the day or moment you woke up, had your aha moment, and started looking back over things with new eyes? Anything outside of hidden history that caught your attention? Simple. It tended to be all the administrators that I was dealing with every day. They just all acted like they were simply talking on a program. That's kind of what started it, since you're asking, so. Yeah, exactly. Hey, old world, underworld. Oh, anti-gravity. Yeah, maybe that would be a way to explain all this. Hey, Julia. Yeah, scaffolding for dismantling. That makes more sense to me, and that's what we tend to see a lot of, isn't it? So. Oh, Christine. Yeah, it does kind of look CGI, doesn't it? Let's take a closer look at that. Good call out there, Christine. Yeah, not really sure what's going on with this wheel. Really, this whole image. But, I didn't take the image. I wasn't there in the 1850s when they built the thing. I'm not going to quote Kyle Reese, what he said when they were giving him a hard time about why nothing dead could go through the time acceleration or time displacement equipment from Terminator, first Terminator. This is the RMS Oceanic, and this was constructed 1898, 1899 time frame. And this was the first ship that was larger than the Great Eastern. So the Great Eastern was the largest ship for about 4 or 5 decades, and then this finally supplanted it. Very interesting. And you might have heard of the line that the ship operated as part of, the White Star Line, which a certain ship called the Olympia operated as part of Titanic. So, And here we have this nice photo of the Oceanic being constructed. And oddly enough, while it's being constructed, we've got people up on the deck. Well, maybe they just took a timeout, or, those were the workers. I'm not sure. Again, I wasn't there. But another very peculiar image, isn't it? And this was the longest ship in the world that finally broke the record from the SS Great Eastern several decades later. I mean, maybe. Keep in mind that this is late 1800s, but yeah, I guess we had the massive dock cranes at that time. I'm not saying it's impossible. Obviously, they're there. It's in the picture, right? And we can believe everything we see in every picture, just like we can believe everything we see in every movie. I still want my warp drive capable starship. I haven't been able to find it yet, but you let me know. But it's another one of those things that really brings up the conflicting account. Kind of looks like its twin that was the Titanic. Yeah, no doubt about it. So, Hey, Action News Network. Yeah, how do you move that thing? Well, it's simple. You flood the dry dock and then you float it into the water. That's what they'll tell you. But, who knows for sure. But anyway, these are cruise ships. And oddly enough, in the Oceanic Ship Dome, we've looked at this before, some very interesting and intricate work on it. Kind of the same things that we expect to see in some of the old world buildings that we looked at. James Watt, Duke Wellington, and Lord Nelson. So I guess they've been converted into some kind of angelic figures, or did they repaint this? I don't know. Again, I wasn't there. That seems almost disrespectful to have old Lord Horatio Nelson shown as a small angelic figure. I don't know, and especially Duke Wellington, Arthur Wellesley, given their reputation. I don't know. Very, very odd. Again, what do these symbols have to do with Great Britain or the United Kingdom? I'm sure they've got something to do with them. Oddly enough, they look awfully... Oh, look, Great Britain. Why does it look like Lady Columbia up here? Am I just seeing things? Am I imagining things? Am I off basis to say that? Very, very odd. You look at the detail in this dome. This is a cruise ship, for crying out loud. What's this over here? Liverpool? Is this Lady Liverpool? Or is this Lady Germania? Why does she have the medical symbol here? All these little odd things in a painting. Very, very strange. I don't have any idea what's going on here. Oh, look at this figure down here. What's this supposed to be? Going off of the symbolism a little bit. Yeah, just the little things you look by looking in the details. Yeah, maybe they know, maybe they don't know. Maybe they're told other things and they just think they know. Oh, that's a good one. Queen Peachy Keen and Dr. Feelgood, no doubt about it. Yeah, just not sure what to make of any of it. Green Man, yeah, you're probably on to something there, Random Effects. Good to see you too, by the way, so. Oh, Elaine, thanks for joining us. Yeah, Chemical General, maybe that's what it's all about. How far we've fallen. Why don't we have cruise ships like this now? Just imagine a Carnival cruise where you could sit and dine in this kind of opulence. Here's the dining area right here. Here's an individual who's dining. It looks pretty nice to me. Look at these flipping windows. All these motifs here. How can you dine in style unless you have an impressive dome, right? But yeah, that's what they had on the RMS Oceanic. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to make of it. It's very peculiar. We got the date down here. Make of it what you will. 1699. No, that's not 1999. Oh, maybe it is for all we know. Anyway, so we go from cruise ships to cannons. Yes, we love to talk about our incredible cannons. And someone told me in comments on one of the Civil War videos from months ago, cannons all fired exploding shells. Well, these were the smoothbore cannons from the Civil War. And of course, you've got random U.S. Civil War officer who seems to have photo deterioration right on his nose. Very unfortunate. Something happened to the eye. But yeah, all those incredible cannons and interesting uniforms. What is going on with this individual? Why does his uniform look like it's about 10 sizes too large? Very odd. But, we're focused on the cannon. So this is the mid 1800s, United States Civil War. This was state of the art cannon technology at the time. So they told us. Oh, thanks for that. We sent that. 1 second. Way behind on these. Hey, Zadie, thank you. Have you ever articulated a counterclaim to the established narrative? Many times. It's called the five eras theory. That's my primary alternative theory. So make of it what you will. We just did a live stream on that recently, so welcome to view that at any point in time. Anyways. Yeah, steampunk. Absolutely right there, Opie. Absolutely right. Yeah, Wendy, always some crazy props. Anyways, please hit the like button. And, this is your classic image here from the Civil War. Everyone just sort of standing around. We have this very well-developed cannon position here. Very heavy cannon. No railway tracks anywhere near here to load this thing onto. I don't know, maybe it's right behind the camera. Maybe the camera's actually on the rail tracks. I don't know. It doesn't really make sense, though, because we're clearly on a ridge line. So how you get a train on a ridge line, I don't know, but I'm sure somebody figured out a way to do it. Maybe they had a horse to pull it. That would make sense. What in the heck is going on with the cloud back here? It's just limitations on the photograph, Make of it what you will. But anyway, this was state-of-the-art naval gun technology at the time. Hey, Old World Underworld, thank you. I appreciate that. So, yeah, and you're right. It does look superimposed. Absolutely. But this was your state-of-the-art cannon technology. Now, prior to the Civil War, they had the U.S. steam frigate, the Princeton, the first, don't take this the wrong way, screw-driven steam frigate, when that technological leap was happening in the 1840s. The USS Princeton and this cannon that was incidentally called the Peacemaker that exploded was designed by a Swedish-American inventor named John Ericsson, who was known for designing the USS Monitor, the first U.S. Navy ironclad. Because somehow the Confederate Navy was ahead of the United States Navy in technology and came up with an ironclad first. The United States Navy had to scramble. Now, there's an interesting film from 1991 called Ironclads. It stars Virginia Madsen, and that's also when she did Highlander 2 in that same year, coincidentally. Great film, that. Anyways, there's a rather comical moment in the movie where President Lincoln's meeting with his war cabinet, as they called it back then before they had the Department of Defense. And, they're all talking about the Monitor, and they talk about John Ericsson, the Swedish inventor, and they have a guy portraying him. And Gideon Wells, the Secretary of the Navy, says, Ericsson was responsible for designing the cannon, but he didn't build it. Oh, so he designed it, but he didn't build it, so when it exploded, he wasn't responsible for it. Anyway, it's just hilarious, the deadpan way he says it. And then, of course, you have the official quote attributed to President Lincoln, and the actor delivers it in a really nice, interesting accent that's kind of an amalgamation of a Midwest and a Southern accent. He says, all I can say is the girl when she stuck her foot in the stocking. It strikes me there's something in it. And apparently Ericsson was able to pull this ship out of nothing in 90 days. And, I guess he was able to train the builders how to do it in under 90 days. And yeah, that's how the official story goes. The United States Navy had the Monitor, and it fought the the CSS Virginia, the Confederate ironclad, to a standstill. Yeah, 1991, Ironclads. Look it up. I think it's available for free on YouTube. But we go from that to these incredible advanced naval guns in the late 1890s, early 1900s, because, we came up with the steam turbines. Now we could propel larger ships, so we need larger guns. And really, if you think about it, this is the modern artillery development that came with that technological revolution, the standardization. So how exactly do we go from cannons to this? What was the real development path? Well, there's a couple you could look at. But again, it's on a very compressed timeline. It was like overnight they went from cannons to this. And of course, you have to have the means to haul around these heavy guns. You have to have the means to produce them in gigantic foundries with this very high quality steel. But what was really the development path to it? Again, a very compressed timeline. Yeah, removable barrel, you're right. Queen Peachy Keen, yes, the military-industrial complex. The start of it, if you will, with the world wars and those two great empires. So, Oh, good one there, Old World Underworld. Yeah, that Ferris wheel axle that we saw in the World's Fair in Chicago. Good call out there. Great example, too. Oh, there's a good comment right there. Michael, and the tech to rifle barrels that large. Absolutely. You don't just do that. That's not just something you can do like making smoothbore Dalren canyons. So, oh, excuse me, cannons. I said canyons. Cannons, not canyons. So, I am Kairos. That's the question of the day, too. Who is delivering all this steel? Well, of course, the great foundries that they built overnight. Naturally, don't worry about it. It was easy to do. They just did it. It happened. It's well documented. But you can find lots of imagery for how they constructed this modern artillery. And yes, that was one of the real terrors of World War I, was suddenly having this modern, accurate artillery, creeping barrages and all those other nasty things, in addition to trench warfare. Don't ask how they managed to dig all the very complex trenches in a very short time in what's supposed to be a war maneuver. Yeah, I know, they were all infantry units, and cavalry really wasn't useful in World War I because of the machine guns. Poor horsies. Don't get me talking about that movie, I'll cry my eyes out. Okay, so here we're looking at the USS Arizona. Now, we looked at the Dreadnought earlier, so yes, the British again invented the modern technology. But the United States followed along, and this is the USS Arizona. And the Arizona was famous for being sunk in that really nasty surprise attack in Pearl Harbor that there was no way the United States could see coming, although Admiral Kimmel sent the aircraft carriers out of there, expecting trouble, but thought that the fleet was invincible. Should be noted, though, that his predecessor warned President Roosevelt that the fleet would be vulnerable at Pearl Harbor and they should station it in San Diego, which, by the way, is where the Pacific Fleet is still based to this day. No secret there. And yeah, it makes perfect sense. But anyway, you look at the original Arizona, you see the old steel cage masts on it, and there's a conflicting account in terms of when the Arizona was built and launched. I mean, it makes sense. It's nothing that's, really that interesting if you think about it. But early 1910s, they built this thing and launched it. Although, oddly enough, when you look at the launch photograph here, you'll notice that none of the superstructure or the guns or the cage mass seem to be on top of it. I mean, maybe they just launched the hull. It just seems rather odd to me. Yeah, we're going to launch the hull and then we'll put everything else on top of it, all in good time. Very, very odd. I mean, I thought they would complete the ship to include the superstructure and the mass and the guns before they launch it. I don't know. Like I said, I was never really in the Navy. I never served in the Navy. I read about it. I'm not an expert. Maybe they launched a ship like this. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. What exactly is going on down here? That's really peculiar. I mean, this is the launching of the Arizona, dated 1915. Thoughts on this? Somebody help me out here. Oh, there you go, Old World Underworld. Maybe the hull was connected to a Zeppelin. Yeah, maybe. That's a good one. Good old Brooklyn Navy Yard. RB, go Navy. Yeah, no doubt about it. I just don't know. So you got one of these nice service cranes here. And of course, and I can't resist showing more New York City imagery from the early 1900s because it's always interesting. But you look at how much of a mix of modernization you have. Now, they say that the steel cage masts were not as advanced. They would blow over in every windstorm, but you think someone would have tested that and figured that out, and then they replaced them with the quote-unquote more modern tripod masts. Apparently, the other thought process was a shell would go right through this. But why would anybody even be aiming for the mast? You aim for the hull to sink the ship? I don't know. Don't ask me. I mean, that's what they said with the design philosophy. Ah, yes. Good old early 1900s New York City. Oh, look at that. Beautiful skyline. I can never get enough of it. We won't say anything about the bridge here. No need to. Of course, the very, very well built up dock facilities. But yes, that's the official count. Great ships just like that, dreadnoughts overnight. So they say. Now, let's look at something else. The United States Navy, to this day, is the primary surface navy that has aircraft carriers. That is the way that the United States military machine projects what is called expeditionary power. They have the ability to put air power anywhere. And don't tell me anything about drones because drones aren't new. In fact, if you watch that 1980 movie Virus, you'll see that they launched a drone from a British submarine in 1980. Somebody knew about them. They didn't just develop them in the 21st century. Of course, if you play Metal Gear 2, you might think that. That's all right, I understand. But anyway, see how they went from the USS Langley, that was a converted Coiler, 1922, the Lexington class, which was converted from a battle cruiser. It really wasn't until you got to the early carriers, really the Yorktown class was the first purpose-built carrier. But then World War II came along, and this is where things get very peculiar. So in 1942, they had what was called the Essex class, what they called the first real fleet carrier. The United States Navy, or the United States, managed to build 24 of these in very short periods of time. And you can see that they could carry a lot of aircraft. And you might also recall that an Essex-class carrier participated in Operation High Jump, coincidentally. And then after World War II, they got rid of a bunch of equipment, but then they continued to develop the carriers until the modern fleet carriers seen to this day. Now, I have actually seen the carriers being built from the ground up. I'm not questioning that we can build modern aircraft carriers. It makes sense. But what's really peculiar to me is how all of a sudden the United States industrial machine was able to rapidly transition and build these aircraft carriers in a quick amount of time. It's very unique. It's a very unique story, especially implementing what was brand new technology. I mean, you think about this. This is only 20 years into this. Rapid technological advancement? I don't know, maybe. Going from a Wright Brothers glider to something that looks like a flying wing and a stealth fighter in 1944? I don't know, maybe. You know, the Horton Ho. Now, granted, the Germans developed the Horton Ho, but still, very, very odd. And then the USS Philippine Sea. Ah, yes, good old CV-47. Admiral Byrd's flagship in Operation High Jump. Because look, if you're going to go to the Antarctica, you need a fleet carrier. Don't ask me why, but you need one. Yes. Oh, here we go. As of today, we have 2 icebreakers. Russia has 40. Well, that's okay, Queen Peachy Keen. Don't worry about that because we've got submarines. And they can just pop up through that ice in any place at any time. RB, we needed to build the docks and infrastructure to support building these also. Absolutely. We also needed to train all the people who were joining this mass industrialization effort. And yet somehow we managed to do it in a very quick amount of time. So it's all very odd. Atom Bomb, this place seems to be like Sim City with cheat codes. Great way to put it, brother Adam. Great way to put it. It does seem like there's cheat codes. Give me the aircraft carrier cheat code. We need 24 of those now. Yeah, it reminds me of that old Super Nintendo game, Pacific Theater of Operations, PTO. Koei had some great games. I'm just going to say that. Okay, I'll stop dating myself. Yeah, I do. It's probably why it annoys people, but, you know, I always like the Yoda laugh, so make of it what you will. Jamie, any advanced tech we are shown has been refined and surpassed long before we're exposed to it. You are probably absolutely correct. In many ways. And seems like you could get jobs without having experience back then. How else did they get all this built? Well, and that's what they try to say officially. Yeah, they just trained everybody on the fly. And such be life. Tried to warn me about that Yoda thing. I'm not going to do any Yoda impressions. I know you're trying to bait me. That's okay. Not going to do it. So anyway, that's it for great ships. But we have one more section to look at. And I'm just going to keep on going because I'm having a lot of fun. Construction and infrastructure. So let's take a look at construction and infrastructure. Now, this image, you will see. Yes. So this is how they tell us they constructed colossal architecture in the distant past. It was all done with backbreaking human and animal labor. And really in this image, it looks like it's all human labor. And you might remember that infamous scene from the film Metropolis where they showed them constructing the Tower of Babel, or the Tower of Babel Part 2, with people just hauling these massive stones across the desert. Yes. So is that really how they built these things? Well, that's what they'll tell us. This was the history of construction. Now, we already talked about the incredible power plants, and just again giving you the idea of the size. This is the one from Ireland. Excuse me. Anyway, yeah, I know I'm not taking a break, but that's okay. I'm pushing myself. It's all good. But then you see it here. And what exactly is going on with how they have this arrayed in here? How much effort did this take to build? It's all very odd that they put it all together in a very short amount of time. But consider the construction that went into it. Now, official history says they had the capability to do it. Nobody's questioning that. But here in Sweden, we have another one of these interesting power plants. Now, again, you see very clear old world construction on it. It's a recurring theme. You have a lot of the building blocks behind it. Not sure what's going on with this rock back here. It could be natural rock, I don't know. But multiple old world buildings. This is in Sweden. And this is another perspective of it. And so again, you can see it's the mason stones that, of course, don't factor into the Industrial Revolution or the Technological Revolution. So obviously that includes not standardizing them, although, you can clearly see they're standardized. Why was it built to look old? It's rustication. Don't question that. Yes. Don't worry, we're going to get around to exploring Sweden and Norway. But then you have other images like this. And, attributed to the early 1900s. Imagine what it took to construct all this. So all the steel, all the ability to transport this, and we're talking about many varied locations that are well away from the railroads. Interestingly enough. But then, this looks like a giant hangar. But then you have other examples of large machinery in here. So, did they just find this? Did they just rebuild it? And what are your thoughts? Very strange. Reno, that's how they built their bikes. Yeah, you might be onto something there. So, Oh, yeah. And this is really where you see the evidence of the example of it, old world, underworld. I mean, in these kind of images. I mean, what's really going on? And there's no shortage of these images. You can find plenty of them all over the place. Internet machine. That looks like the Dr. Seuss thing. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Ah, Sean. All found, yeah. And all in the same time frame, too. Like when we talked about the ascendancy of the airship in the official historical account, it matches when they started using this heavy machinery. So very, very interesting, isn't it? But, then you look at your generators, your steam turbines, or whatever other uses these incredibly large wheels had, and you'll get a multitude of uses behind them. But just ask these questions. If this is late 1890s, early 1900s, how exactly were these constructed? What metal is this? Is it just iron, or is this a form of steel, or is it something else? Why is it that a lot of the metal that was made in what's attributed to the 1800s still exists to this day? For example, I have door handles in my house that were apparently constructed in 1890, and they are bulletproof. They are hammer-proof. They cannot be destroyed. But, if you get a house built in 2012, you can pull the door right off if you're not careful, the door handle. Or the door, too, while you're at it, and, you can fall through your wall. So I'm not going to talk about containerized housing construction, but just making an observation. Maybe it's just because I happen to have the one house that has really nice, authentic door handles. I don't know. But then you see other images like this with this large-scale machinery. Now, granted, this will be attributed to later years when they could do this, and yet it gets really bizarre the more you look into it, such as images like this. Looking at these hydroelectric plants, yet it gives you the impression that this is a lot older. You can look at what this individual's wearing in this image. You can tell this is attributed to the early 1900s, although who knows. How old is this? Does this look like something that was just built? That they were just going to throw out there in Ireland for their hydroelectric plants? Or Sweden, or the United States, or where have you? Hippie, I went inside the Tower Bridge in London. The huge metal wheels, the hydraulics to lift that are incredible. Yeah, exactly. Great example there. I have to explore the Tower Bridge. I've only looked at London Bridge. Thanks for mentioning that, Hippie Shake. I appreciate that. So, yeah, you said it, Chassis. It definitely looks used. Looks quite used, doesn't it? Well, something happened there, Julia. Something happened. And we still see it to this day. You can find many examples, so. Jason, what about the Soviet Union and their industrial age? We're getting to that, Jason. Just hold on. I got an example. Hey, Calvin looking for obs. Good to see you. The precision of the rivet pattern. Yeah. The rivet patterning is very amazing. You know, and I was laughing about that when they talked about John Ericsson building the monitor. Did he go out and build it himself with his bare hands? So here we're in Ireland looking at the construction photos of the power station. Yeah, got your little steam digger here that's just digging right through the rock, apparently, I guess. And this other very convincing photo that just shows them laying out the dam. Yeah, I don't know if I'm really actually seeing any construction, but, you know, there's hints of construction, maybe, I guess. You know, make of it what you will, as I'm fond of saying. And again, other construction images that seem to raise more questions than they answer. Now, this is 1920s, Free State of Ireland, building their own hydroelectric plants, because everybody was doing it. But yes, very peculiar, and you know, you'll see these generators that we looked at earlier, and you remember how large they are. Yeah, you know, I guess, you know, if you had an airship that could lift something like that, that might make sense. But, you know, we're told they didn't. Airships couldn't do that. They didn't have that capability. That's what the official history says. I wanted to show this grid pattern of Washington, D.C., because this is attributed to the very early days of Washington, D.C. And yet, oddly enough, this is the same grid pattern. Now, I'm just taking Washington, D.C. as an example. You can take really any city. Paris is another great example, but you can find it in every city. The original grid patterns. Think about what's actually built on the foundation level. Think about when the sewers were constructed. Think about when the subsurface, everything below the ground, was constructed. And then think about everything that's built on top of it. They say, we're informed, I should say, that the original plan for Washington, D.C. comes from prior to the 1800s. It's still the plan that's abided by to this day. You know, they even had the street grades planned out. But it still goes by this to this day. You know what this is. But it's very, very odd. How were they able to plan this out in 1790 to 1800 and still have this make sense in a modern application? Well, you could argue that's why we have traffic jams in Washington, D.C., and you need to take the rail transport. Yes, the Pennypack Creek Bridge, built circa 1697. This is in Pennsylvania. And this is what she looks like right here. Yes. Well, actually, I should say this is in Philadelphia. Philadelphia. Be very specific about it. So this is a bridge that was built in the United States in 1697 that is still standing, still in operation to this day. Let me do my math here. This baby is over 300 years old. What a bridge. 300 years old. And a highway goes over it. And you can still drive over it to this day. Now, why am I highlighting this? I want you to think about this. No matter where you live, anywhere in the land, think about how much infrastructure, bridges, roads, dams, power generation, how much of it was actually built prior to 1920. I mean, this is the most extreme example here. We're talking late 1600s in the United States, no less. They built this mighty bridge that still stands to this day. But just think about this. How much old infrastructure do we rely on as a civilization? Does it make any sense? This bridge was built long before the United States was even a thought. This bridge was built before the French-Indian War happened, for crying out loud, in the United States. Oh yeah, there you go. The natives must have helped. Well, their explanation is there, right? They showed them how to build a bridge. This is how you build a bridge that lasts, right? Oh, goodness. Yeah, no doubt. There you go, my bailiwick zone. Definitely one that's on tab for an on-site exploration. Definitely going to need the expert opinion of a civil engineer, too. But just imagine that, being able to build something from that time frame. And it still lasts to this day. Can you imagine us building anything now that'll be around in 300 years? Yeah, I don't know what's our real story. I mean, is that a sewer? Is that an outlet? I'm not sure. Pretty amazing, though. 1697. I mean, for crying out loud, that's the same century that the 30 Years' War happened. Just blows my mind. Now we're looking at the Mississippi River Power Plant in Keokuk, Iowa. Another great construction photo. You know that because they wrote it with a Sharpie, apparently a Sharpie that worked up here in the top. Maybe Peter Weller wrote it, with a Sharpie that worked. I'm serious. If Peter Weller has a Sharpie that doesn't work, he gets upset. You don't want to see Peter Weller upset. Yes, I'm talking about that Peter Weller. Oh, by the way, did you know Peter Weller was also from Wisconsin, just like Willem Dafoe? Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about Peter Weller. He can be a little unpredictable if you get him mad. Great guy, great actor, don't take me wrong. What the heck does that say down there? Very, very odd. So they're building this incredible dam, and we've explored this before. Miracles on the Frontier, that exploration, if you want to go back and look at that. I've got actual footage of this incredible dam that they built in Keokuk, Iowa, a city that today has less than 10,000 people, a city that never had 14,000 people in it. But it was one of those principles of if you build it, they will come. 1910, early 1910s, that's when they built this incredible dam and power plant. Yes, and from that we go to this amazing hydraulic forge press in Krupp, Germany, it's from the Krupp company in Germany in the 1920s. Yes, look at this baby. Kind of hard to imagine that this is real, isn't it? I mean, every time I see this image, I question it. What do you think? Yeah, no doubt. Sean P., it's a transformer. Yeah, it might be for all we know. Well, okay, see, you can never get enough of those wheels and pulleys, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I'll be honest with you. I question this image every time I see it, but, we're assured that it's an authentic image, I guess. I don't know. Just incredible, 1920s. Well, no wonder they could build those colossal pieces of equipment in Germany. And why during World War II they had all those grandiose ideas to build those incredibly large vehicles and those amazing railguns. I mean, if you've got equipment like this, yeah, you may as well build colossally. Just made up a word. Silly me, I made up a word that doesn't exist. So going back to that earlier consideration, when did they actually have the steam shovel? You might remember we had Teddy Roosevelt himself operating one when they were building the Panama Canal at the start of the 1900s. But, what's its capability? What can it really do? You would think that there would be all kinds of issues with this steam shovel, mechanical issues and so on and so forth. I mean, if you're ever in any kind of modern vehicle or modern tracked vehicle, there's all kinds of mechanical issues with it. And that's with a modern turbine that runs on jet fuel, JP8. Yes, of course, I'm talking about the venerable United States M1A1 or M1A2 or A3 or whatever they're at now, main battle tank, as they call it. That thing has all kinds of mechanical challenges. But, you just have to work on it. I don't know. What was the capability of this? Very, very odd. There you go, Adam. Yeah, Fred Flintstone would know. Chassis. If that was real, how did they even destroy it? Well, you never know. Fire can destroy all kinds of things, apparently, chassis, so it's rather hard to say. Hey, Philip. Yeah, architects founded it. No doubt about it. So I don't know. I mean, we look at all this incredible equipment with its colossal size, what to really say about it. And it's hard to really come to a conclusion. Now, this is the hydroelectric plant that's in that incredible dam that they built in Keokuk, Iowa. Remember, a city not at 10,000 people. The real Lucius Aurelian may be in this photograph somewhere. Maybe not. But here's what it looks like. The old black and white image. Show this massive power plant that's in this building and then this incredible dam all across the entire Mississippi River. In this small town that seems to have been lost to time. It's really strange. Now, the official count says they were building this in Keokuk because they expected Keokuk to basically become like St. Louis. Even though they already had St. Louis, it was already established. This is early 1900s. We're not talking about 1800 or anything here. It's very, very odd. And then, of course, the same kind of hydraulic or hydroelectric equipment. So the question I have is, why aren't we building more of these today? Let's increase our infrastructure. Let's give more people work. Where are all the entrepreneurs to build these things? Well, there's too many regulations. We just don't have enough money. Granted, you can go as far into debt as you want to if you're a nation or corporation, it seems. But maybe that's just me talking. Oh, here's one of the one. I think this is actually in Russia. One of the hydroelectric plants in Leningrad, today's St. Petersburg. Nice floor, huh? I guess that's the kind of floor that you need for a control panel. Or maybe this is Sweden. I'm trying to remember. Maybe this is the one in Sweden, I think. Yeah. What do you need a checkerboard floor for here? Well, maybe you want to play chess or something while you're running your hydroelectric plant. Not really sure. And then I just thought it's interesting looking at some of the original printing presses. We look at papers from the old days. Of course, nobody ever questions how long paper lasts before it breaks down. It's very odd. And then, those upstart Americans, once they figured out the railroad and steam locomotion from the British, they managed to build the railroads a lot faster for some reason and quickly bridge the entire continent. Now, remember that building a railroad is just a little bit more complicated than just laying the tracks all the way out there across infinite miles of land. You also have to build the infrastructure because remember, trains do not go up mountains. Trains do not go down canyons. Trains do not just go through rivers. You have to build bridges, you have to tunnel through the mountains, you have to build amazing tunnels, and you have to have the ability to do it quickly. Well, you just look at the railroad mileage that was built in 20 years, and we've been over this before. But I'm just trying to imagine or think about, building this railway, this north-south railway that went all the way from Southern California up to Seattle. Wasn't there in 1870. It was there by 1890. Well, it's well documented. They did it. It was no problem. Of course, it was no problem. When you can move the gauge of 11,000 miles of track, all here in the South, or what was formerly the Confederate States of America until the end of the United States Civil War, again, according to the official history, when you can move 11,000 miles of gauge of one track in 36 hours, you can do anything, right? Don't question it. But looking at some of the early heavy machinery that was applied for agricultural purposes, like the very rudimentary combine, that's stated to be the official first heavy machinery in 1890. But again, it's all on that compressed timeline. Oh, and you still needed the horses to pull it, of course, but, because where would you be without your horses? Why do we have what looks to be a foal right there? That's odd. Who knows? Oh, yeah, so back to that impressive power dam, as they call it, in Keokuk, Iowa. This is the view on the Hamilton, Illinois side. Now, is this really a construction photo? Oh, by the way, there is a 6-minute long film that documents the construction of this dam. I'd say it's about as convincing as that documentation they have of the Hoover Dam, or the Boulder Dam, as they called it. Yeah, there you go. 1 million miles of track by 1900, no problem. Oh, by the way, Gregory, that's not counting all the places that you can find random railway track in the United States, in any small town or whatever else you have. So, quite fascinating. Duck sauce. I believe that archaeologists may have excavated that much track in 20 years, but not build. And it's funny you say that, because even excavating it, how hard would that be if that's what they did? Cleaning it off, getting it back in service. Oh, that's a good point there, Calvin, looking for Hobbs. California Highway 1 washed out. Yeah, the old, the PCH, right? Pacific Coast Highway. Very, very strange. Hey, Angel Dreams. Homemade paper for cards, and it's ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know. And, last but not least, going back and looking at that hydroelectric plant that they built in St. Petersburg, what was Leningrad at the time, Soviet Union. We've explored St. Petersburg before. And oddly enough, the images look the same. The building looks like it's really old. The equipment looks like it's really old. But this is the Soviet Union, in the nascent days of the Soviet Union, the 1920s, and their 5-year plans to rapidly industrialize. Coincidentally, they were doing it at the exact same time that Ireland was in the 1920s. That's what this is attributed to. Of course, you got the poor workhorsey pulling things across the track. It just seems very peculiar. Of course, the official statement is that the Soviet Union lacked motorized transport. In fact, they did in World War II. That's why they needed all the logistic convoys from the United States to give them that motorized transport. Of course, they could move entire factories to the Urals, and they could produce more T-34 tanks than the rest of the world combined, but at the same time, they still needed that help. And we won't talk about the fact that they were not taken by surprise by the Japanese in the battles of Khalkhin-Gol in 1939, but they were taken by surprise by the Germans in 1941, their ideological enemy for hundreds of years, who had betrayed numerous other nations, but somehow those sneaky Germans managed to park a 3 million man army and thousands of tanks on their border. Well, to credit the Red Army, they reported it, but it was ignored. So anyway, not going off on that. But back to St. Petersburg. Yeah, oddly enough, it looks very similar to that main building that you have in Keokuk, Iowa. But this is attributed to the Soviet Union at the time. Why does it look so dirty and so old? It's just built. Well, if you're one of those Americans, you'll say, it's because in the Soviet Union, everything was built to be old and dirty. Yet, oddly enough, when you look closely at it, you'll see that it has the same signs of architecture. And I would never dare say that anything in St. Petersburg, especially some of the constructions they have there, are old and dirty, like St. Isaac's, for example. But, still operational to this day. And I mean, and you look at this, very modern looking. Who knows what date this photo is attributed to. But it's really odd how in these different nations, different political systems, different economic systems, we see so many similarities and the same application of technology. How do we account for that? Very, very odd. Yeah, you're right, Christine. Irish, Chinese, yeah, that's what the official account says. Maybe true. Maybe you had Tom Cruise going around there like in, what was that film, Far and Away, in Oklahoma. Yeah, it does, Macy. It does look like the Hoover Dam works. Scottish engineers. Well, that's where they got the concept of Montgomery Scott from, Random FX, so. Hydroelectric power. And that's just the question I have. Why aren't we still using hydroelectric to this day? Why isn't it still so prevalent to this day? So anyway, that concludes the exploration. And I really appreciate everyone being here. And please support the channel and hit the like button. I had a lot of fun doing this one. I hope you enjoyed this. Usually I don't just completely go off like this, but what can I say? I couldn't help myself. I'm human. Oh, there you go, Sky Sage. Yeah, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Old World Underworld, maybe a recharge station for different machines. No doubt about it. I mean, why is it still attributed as a power station? Mr. Something Else Octopus Generators, I like that. Yeah, Metropolis may well be a history film. No doubt about it.